9-year-old girl got maced by the police. Fire. Man.
Get in the car. I don't care what you demand.
Come on, man. Look at it. This is a little girl. She's 9 years old. Don't nobody feel no type of way. You got these people running around with stimulus checks acting like ain't nothing going on. Where the gangsters at? I go. Agobi. Ile mokyo. Yeshua mokyo. Oguna mokyo.
I would write this shit in fire. This is a war cry. This is Sankofa, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Southside, Chicago, Compton, California, Roosevelt Projects in Brooklyn.
They shoot back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we get back. 4 times for the Eddie could crack. They shoot back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we make stack. Revolution like hate like that. I'm a king with a crown that's facts. She a queen with a crown that's facts. I'm a G, she a G that stacks. I'm a G, she a G that match. From my G's in the back that trap. Be a G, get back, that's tax. See, we a feet who need this facts. And we'll teach TC this facts. So when you see we eat the snacks. If we see deceit, this cats. Be a key to the free that latch. Be a key to a seed that hatch. From my G's in the back that trap. Be a G, flip that, that's racks. See a LLC, get that. And start a business, please, just that. If they shoot back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we get back. 4 times for the Eddie could crack. They shoot back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we make stack. Revolution like hate like that. See the crown where it's at, this hat. And we gon' lay it down flat, this smack. Fall asleep where you at, this snap. See an open hand slap, the smash. While we even at all's mishaps. I'm like even that's all mismatch. Spit this, spit that, spit facts. Kick this, kick that, click clack. If they shoot back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we get back. 4 times for the Eddie could crack. They shoot back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we make stack. Revolution like hate. I'm back for those who came before me. Let the legacy live through me. My ancestors giving honor, you dig? Tell them crown me king. Tell them crown me king. Tell them crown me king. I'ma crown me king. They told me do this for the sisters who gotta work that job. She just trying to raise her babies while she goes so hard. Tell her crown me king. Tell her crown me king. Tell her crown me king. I'ma crown me king. It's for the brothers on the struggle locked inside of that cell. Just know I'm trying to free your mind, get you out of that jail. Tell them crown me king. Tell them crown me king. Tell them crown me king. I'ma crown me king. You know the children are the future, teenage boys and girls. Get your money, start a business, and take over the world. Tell them crown me king. Tell them crown me king. Tell them crown me king. I'ma crown me king.
I am the niece of exploitation on a rice and pancake box. Come to collect the royalties for Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben. I am refreshing the bones, a witch, a root worker, a sorceress, a priestess, a gangster.
They shoot back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we get back. 4 times for the Eddie could crack. They shoot back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we make stack. Revolution like hate like that.
9-year-old girl got maced by the police. Uh-huh. Her. Man.
Get in the car. I don't care what you demand.
Come on, man. Look at it. This is a little girl. She's 9 years old. Don't nobody feel no type of way. You got these people running around with stimulus checks acting like ain't nothing going on. Where the gangsters at? I go. Agobi. Ile mokyo. Eshuo mokyo.
Write this shit in fire. I would write this shit in fire. This is a war cry. This is Sankofa, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Southside, Chicago, Compton, California, Roosevelt Projects in Brooklyn.
They shoot you back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we get back. 4.
9-year-old girl got maced by the police. Uh-huh. Her. Man.
Get in the car. I don't care what you demand.
Come on, man. Look at it. This is a little girl. She's 9 years old. Don't nobody feel no type of way. You got these people running around with stimulus checks acting like ain't nothing going on. Where the gangsters at? I go. Agobi. Ile mokyo. Eshuo mokyo.
Write this shit in fire. I would write this shit in fire. This is a war cry. This is Sankofa, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Southside, Chicago, Compton, California, Roosevelt Projects in Brooklyn.
They shoot you back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we get back. 4 times for the edge could crack. They shoot you back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we make stack. Revolution like hate like that. I'm a king with a crown that's facts. She a queen with a crown that's facts. I'm a G, she a G that stacks. I'm a G, she a G that match. From my G's in the bag that trap. Be a G, get back, that's tax. See, we a feet who need this facts. And we'll teach TC this facts. So when you see we eat the snacks. If we see deceit, this cats. Be a key to the free that latch. Be a key to a seed that hatch. From my G's in the bag that trap. Be a G, flip that, that's racks. See a LLC, get that. And start a business, please, this that. They shoot you back like 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 that. 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we get back. 4 times for the edge could crack. They shoot you back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we make stack. Revolution like hate like that. See the crown where it's at, this hat. And we gon' lay it down flat, this smash. Fall asleep where you at, this snap. See an open hand slap, this smash. While we even at all's mishaps. I'm like even that's all mismatch. Spit this, spit that, spit fast. Kick this, kick that, click clack. If they shoot you back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we get back. 4 times for the edge could crack. They shoot you back like that. 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 1 time for the baby that's black. 2 times for the lady that's black. 3 times for the way we make stack. Revolution like hate like that. For those who came before me. baby, let the legacy live through me, my ancestors, giving honor, you dig? Tell them crown me king, tell them crown me king, tell them crown me king, I'ma crown me king. They told me do this for the sisters who gotta work that job. She just trying to raise her babies while she goes so hard. Tell her crown me king, tell her crown me king, tell her crown me king, I'ma crown me king. It's for the brothers on the struggle locked inside of that cell. Just know I'm trying to free your mind, get you out of that jail. Tell them crown me king, tell them crown me king, tell them crown me king, I'ma crown me king. You know the children are the future, teenage boys and girls. Get your money, start a business, then take over the world. Tell them crown me king, tell them crown me king, tell them crown me king, I'ma crown me king.
I am the niece of exploitation on a rice and pancake box. Come to collect the royalties for Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben. I am refreshing the bones, a witch, a root worker, a sorceress, a priestess, a gangster.
They shoot you back like flat. 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 One time for the baby that's black. Two times for the lady that's black. Three times for the way to get back. Four times for the Eddie could crack. They shoot you back like flat. 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 One time for the baby that's black. Two times for the lady that's black. Three times for the way we make stack. Revolution like Haiti like that.
Things tickling. Things tickling.
Down their businesses and buying back the block. And let's open our own business so we'll have some place to shop. Start investing in ourselves is what we do, cause they do not. So we shutting down their businesses and buying back the block. Yeah, we shutting down their businesses and buying back the block. Every hustler that could hustle, start investing in your spot. Don't you see these vacant houses and you see these vacant lots? So we shutting down their businesses and buying back the block. Yeah, we buying back the block. My brothers buying back the block. Sisters buying back the block, my sisters buying back the block. Don't you see these vacant houses and you see these vacant lots? So we shutting down their businesses and buying back the block. Yeah, we buying back the block, my OGs buying back the block. Youngins buying back the block, my youngins buying back the block. Start investing in yourselves is what we do, cause they do not. So we shutting down their businesses and buying back the block. If we gon' get this cash and chop, this bullshit's got to stop. All this his beef, her beef, this and that, man, let's just get some guap. Dodging SWAT and got the digi, really, let's invest the stock. I suggest we cash some checks, it's really just a building block. See my circles talking cheese and bread and dough like pizza box. So let's get some cheese and bread and dough for our own pizza shop. And we never needin' your fast food when auntie making plates. Cause that's fish and fries, you get 2 sides of drink and slice of cake. The mechanic shop, the barber shop, the hair and nail salon. On the corner store or grocery store, let's get some season farm. Cause when summertime, when school let out, we started up a julep house. Then we passed it to the kids to show them what this bit is about. Used to grind the tubers out the Buick with the music clout. Now he with the wife and kids to show you what them Jews about. 10%, $100,000 is just stacks. So all you need is $10,000 to buy a house for 100 racks. Wait, all you need is $10,000 to buy a house for 100 racks. Yup, all you need is $10,000. Think of that with your income tax. Shutting down their businesses and buying back the block. And let's open our own business so we'll have some place to shop. Start investing in ourselves, is what we do, cause they do not. So we shutting down their businesses and buying back the block. Yeah, we shutting down their businesses and buying back the block. Every hustler that could hustle, start investing in your spot. Don't you see these vacant houses and you see these vacant lots? So we shutting down their businesses and buying back the block.
Yeah. If you getting money, stop buying back the neighborhood. Buy up these houses, these empty lots. Stop buying buildings, opening businesses. Stop buying land, property. You know what I'm saying? If you want to multiply your choppy, I don't care how you getting your bread. Shout out to my peoples up at Be Healthy. You know what I mean? Why we ain't got no grocery stores?
DJ Nani Non.
Since the beginning of time, civilizations have asked the questions. What is the human soul? How do we know it exists? Do we control our reality? Or are we actually living within a dream? What truly happens when we pass away? Join two of the world's leading experts in higher consciousness, and discover the truth about the soul, and the path to enlightenment. This is The Living Soul.
Welcome to The Living Soul. I'm your host, Kathy Gibson.
And I'm Dr. Mitchell Gibson, her loving husband.
Yes. And today we're going to talk about violence. Why do we hurt each other? It's part 2 from our show that we had last week about this very subject, and we only got to the physical part of violence. So let's tell them a little bit about last week's show and then get into this week's show.
Well, last week we looked at physical violence and the spiritual perspective of why violence affects our community so much. We talked about the different kinds of violence. We mentioned emotional violence, which is where somebody abuses you emotionally. We talked about physical violence, where a person's being beaten. We hinted a little bit at financial violence, but this week we want to spend more time talking about financial violence. And one of the defining types of violence in our community, both Black and white, is child support struggles. We're going to look at the spiritual perspective of the ubiquitous trouble with child support, why it vexes so many people in our communities. It affects the children, it affects our court system. It also in many ways defines a person's financial life. So we're going to talk about the system and the spiritual perspective of child support, and then go into a little bit more about emotional and mental violence.
I know a lot of women do not go through the court system when it comes to child support. The father of the child says, I'm going to pay you every month. We don't need to go into the system, because once it gets into the system, then they can be garnished with their checks. They don't have any control over when the money comes out. So they are actually pushed to pay what they should be paying anyway. You shouldn't be forced to pay for your child's well-being. You should want to pay for your child's well-being. But in most situations, when it comes to child support, a lot of women don't go through the system, and then they depend on the father of the child to make those payments. And they're usually chasing that father around every month around the same time, for their payment.
Now, to be fair, child support goes both ways. There are a lot of men that pay their child support, that love their children, that spend time with their children, that go to the school functions, that go to church with their children, that spend time with their children on the weekend and love their children. So there are both sides of this, and there are a lot of women, and there are some women out there who make more than their spouses or mates and have to pay child support.
Mhm.
They also pay their child support, take care of their children, come home to be with their children. And it's a situation that isn't just the people that don't pay. There are people out there that do pay, so don't get us wrong. We're not saying that everybody doesn't pay child support, but we're
Mhm.
talking about the people skip out on their responsibilities, that see children as a burden. They see child support as a burden. And those people feed into a system of violence that, in too many cases, defines our communities. I know, I'll start with myself, I'll just be self disclosing. I grew up in a family of 5 kids,
Mhm.
and my father kicked us out with my mother when I was 5 years old. He forced us out of the house. We went to live with his parents. His parents forced us out of the house after a few months, and
Mhm.
then we went to live with my grandmother's parents. And we stayed with my grandmother's parents for several years until my mother saved up enough money to get her own house with us in it.
Mhm.
During this time, my father refused to pay any reasonable child support. He might give $20 every few months,
Mhm.
but he wouldn't come visit. He didn't pay child support. So I grew up with the perspective of child support being withheld as an emotional weapon. He was
Mhm.
angry with us. I mean, why are you going to be angry with a 5-year-old? But he was. And he was angry with my mother. So I grew up with a firsthand perspective of the violence and the abuse that can be caused by child support being withheld when it was absolutely needed, absolutely necessary.
So the question would become, why didn't your mother go through the system?
Exactly. Exactly. My mother had the idea that she could do it all on her own. Well, she had grandparents. Her
Mhm.
parents were helping her. She had my cousin Brenda, who was helping her. She had a lot of people in the community that were helping her. So it was no way, shape, or form her doing it by herself. She felt like as long as people were helping her, she didn't need him.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a mistake in consciousness. That if you have children, and if a person makes children with you, both people have a responsibility to contribute to that child's welfare, to the children's welfare.
Mhm.
Children need more than just the basics.
Mhm.
Children deserve to have a luxury now and then.
Mhm.
They deserve to be pampered, they deserve to be coddled, and they deserve to be able to take a trip with the rest of the class. They deserve to have ice cream now and then.
Mhm.
They deserve to get braces if they need them. They shouldn't be used as pawns between
Mhm.
parents who are struggling with their own insecurities and use the child as a tool on a battlefield to beat each other with. What
Mhm.
do you think? You've been through this as
Well,
well.
I had 2 children, and in my first marriage, I didn't go through the system for child support, and for the first, I would say, 13, 14 years of their lives, I would, on the 15th of every month or the first of every month, I would call and he would send the money. So for the first 14 years, he was very good at making those payments. And that's how we communicated. He didn't spend much time with the kids, but he would always make his payments. So once I got remarried, when I married you, those payments stopped. I guess he just felt that I didn't need that assistance or his responsibility
So
stopped.
he had certain feelings about you getting remarried. And
Hmm.
once those feelings kicked in, his child support payments were affected by that.
Hmm.
We see that so much in our community. We see the emotions about marriage, remarriage, relationships, something somebody gets angry about, becoming a tool or a pawn between the child, the mate, and the community.
Hmm.
Too often the community gets involved and they say, well, he's doing this or she's doing that. And by the time the emotions get settled out, the child ends up being the person that suffers more than anything. We're going to continue this discussion in a few minutes and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Humans are a complex, psychological, physical, and emotional race. We also engage in violence, more than any other race on the planet. Let us examine violence in the human race. Psychological violence occurs when one person forces their will upon one or more people. This kind of violence is very common, and in many circumstances, constitutes criminal behavior. The act of war occurs when one group or country attacks another. Financial violence occurs when money, property, or anything of financial value is stolen. Such greed can lead to crimes such as murder, kidnapping, and war. When one country invades another, violence can cost millions of lives. Do other races wage war on each other? The human race has embraced violence for thousands of years. Violence is part of humanity. Violence is part of our DNA. The consciousness that creates violence is ancient. Violence occurs in our dreams, in our waking thoughts, and in our visions. We embrace violence in movies and on television. Our understanding of what violence is largely dependent upon consciousness. Consciousness tells us what is violent and what is not, through the power of decision. Sometimes, our decisions lead us to acts of violence against ourselves. Suicide, for this reason, has reached epidemic proportions. Violence begins with a choice made within the soul. The choice to allow dark forces to dominate consciousness, or to allow the forces of light to dominate consciousness, is the seed of violence within the soul.
And we're back. Thank you so much for joining us. We're Mitch and Kathy Gibson. You're live with the Living Soul Show. Well, actually, you might be with the recording, but we're live. Welcome back. The spiritual perspective of child support and the soul is something I thought that we should cover in this part of the show. Everyone has a soul. Children have souls, and the child's soul matures and grows throughout the life of a child. A child's soul starts in one position when they're young, but when they reach puberty, something changes in the child, and the child becomes an adult.
Mm-hmm.
But during that process of going from being a fetus to being an adult, going through puberty, that child needs everything. They need food, they need housing, they need clothing, and more importantly, they need love.
Mm-hmm.
But during all that, I mean, let's just break it down. That child needs money.
Mm-hmm.
That child needs support. That child's not going to grow up properly if that child's soul is not fed with all of the things they need. And that is the responsibility of the parents, both male and female, if the parents are both there, the responsibility to take care of that child, to give that child what that child needs, feeds that child's soul so that child's soul grows up properly.
Hmm. Well, let's look at it. This is a show about why do we hurt each other, and we're talking about the abuse financially on a child who is the recipient of the energy that's coming from both parents,
And the main victim
the
of being
main
hurt.
victim of being the center of it. So we're really looking at the spiritual perspective of the person who's abusing the child by not making their child support, by not helping to give the child what the child needs as far as money, food, shelter, protection, and support. The child needs support. So, what happens to the individual who decides that in order to stay out of the system, he's just going to not try? He's going to quit his job. He's not going to try and do what he can or she can to make that responsibility met. What happens to that person when they're withholding their responsibility?
Well, I'm just going to answer
Mhm.
it if I can. And you can give your perspective as
Mhm.
well. The soul of every individual that draws breath is in a constant struggle between dark and light,
Mhm.
creative and destructive. And I'm not talking about God and Satan. I'm talking about our own inner struggle to be a creative, productive part of the community.
Mhm.
But there's a part of us that doesn't want to be a creative, productive part of the community. There's a part of us that wants to be destructive. There's a part of us that wants to do bad. And we can sometimes see that part of us being acted out against children,
Mhm.
against a spouse, against a mate, against a girlfriend or a boyfriend that has a child in common with us. And that's why one of the seminal types of violence in our community is the child support struggle. It is the seminal, one of the most important battles between the dark side of the soul and the light side of the soul. We see people all the time that battle each other for years with the construct of, I'm not going to do this and you're not going to make me. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to keep having children. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. And at the end of the day, they're hurting each other. They're
Mhm.
hurting that child. They're hurting themselves.
Well, there's a reason why Maury Povich's show has been on for over 25
Maury's
years.
been doing that since I was in high school, the same show, but
Same show.
huge ratings, bigger than that, because it reflects this battle.
Mhm.
And it's a battle we're going to talk about a little bit more when we come back. Thank you for joining us.
We have talked a lot about the financial struggle of child support not being paid to whichever parent happens to be the main parent that's taking care of the child. But let's talk about the emotional impact that this has on the mother, the father, and the children. What is the emotional impact, and how does that carry on to a young child as they go into adulthood? As you said earlier, you were a victim of that same abuse. How did that affect you?
There's a part of our consciousness that grows in response to how people give to us, what they give, if the giving is withheld, if the giving is free, if the giving comes with violence or the giving comes with strings. And that consciousness goes with us throughout our entire lives, whether we give in relationships, whether we learn to receive in relationships, what type of jobs we let ourselves have, and just as importantly, how much money we tend to let ourselves make
Mhm.
if we let ourselves work, if we let ourselves be violent in life, or if we let ourselves be kind and friendly in life. It all starts with how we are given to.
Mhm.
The emotional violence and the mental violence that exists in the world starts when we are young.
Mhm.
It starts when we are the victim or the recipient of violent tendencies and thoughts and actions from others. And we take those into ourselves and then we make a decision. Every one of us has to make this choice in life. Am I going to respond to this violence by being a violent person,
Mhm.
or am I going to rise above it and be a person that contributes to society and grows in spite of that?
Mhm.
It's a choice that's made inside the soul. I mean, this show is about the human soul, but the soul is affected by these factors
Mhm.
that influence the choices that we make.
I also see that the soul puts us in situations to help us make that decision, to help us make that choice. They'll put you in company with people who tend to be either more violent or tend to be kind and compassionate and loving. If you're fortunate enough to be around people who have a positive outlook on life, then you will start to see that that thought form, that program that's running in your head, that you are not good enough, that uh, you aren't worth being loved, that you shouldn't have the best things in life, that program and that thought form is running in your head. But when you get around very positive people, you'll find that it starts to shift. And if you find yourself, be aware that your soul has you in that position for a reason. It is time for you to tackle that thought form that's been running in your head saying that you're not good enough.
That small, still inner voice that we have, that's the voice of your soul.
Mm-hmm.
The soul is the part of us that makes the decision who you date,
Mm-hmm.
who you hang out with, who you make love to, who you live with, who you work for. The voice of the soul is the voice that shapes your entire existence.
Mm-hmm.
It is the voice that determines if you're going to be a violent person, if you're going to be a kind, constructive person, if you're going to be a violent, destructive person.
Mm-hmm.
That's the voice that you respond to in creating that in your life. It is also the voice that you respond to when you decide what kind of people you're going to be with. It is very important to learn to listen to that still small voice that we call the soul.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows what it sounds like when you're in a store and you're going to decide, am I going to steal this shirt, or am I going to take the $30 into my account and spend 15 of it to buy this shirt?
Mm-hmm.
In that moment, your soul is going to talk to you. Your soul is going to say, buy the shirt, or the dark side of your soul, the dark side of your soul is going to say, steal it, nobody's watching.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to make a decision. That decision is made by your consciousness. And as your consciousness makes one decision and then another and then another, you create a wave of consciousness. You create a tendency in your consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, that tendency defines who you are.
It
If
does.
you are a violent, destructive person, or if you are a kind, destructive, if you're a kind, constructive person.
Mm-hmm. The one thing you'll find about the two voices that run in your head is that the voice for being destructive is always very loud. It's the loudest voice you're going to hear.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
The other voice, the voice that tries to get you to do the moral or right thing, is a whisper. And that's why it's so important to quiet your mind.
That's why you can never go to a fight. There's no such thing as a quiet fight.
There's no quiet
It's not going to
fight.
be quiet. There's going to be yelling, hitting, punching, kicking,
Cursing.
spitting.
It's going to be a lot of noise.
It's going to be a lot.
So if you find yourself sitting silently, then that's when you can hear what your soul's trying to tell you. Your soul's trying to guide you to have the best life that you can have. But we are so busy in trying to do so many things that we don't spend enough time just sitting silently. And you need to listen to that whispered voice. That voice is going to tell you, hey, you are loved, you are a beautiful person, you're compassionate. There's nothing that you can't do if you put your mind to it. That voice, that part of your soul, is God trying to talk to you, trying to get your attention. And it is really up to you to quiet that mind so that you can hear. We get involved in so many things where it's so noisy, the thoughts are so loud that we can't even hear ourselves think.
There are some things you can do to protect yourself from violence. First of all, if you're in a violent situation, get some help, get some counseling, call somebody, call the police, call a family member that you can trust. Also, learn to sit and be still with your thoughts so you can listen to that voice of the soul that will talk to you and help you through that. There's been so many times in life where my wife and I will have situations happen around us. Just talking to her, listening to her voice has helped me tremendously in so many things. And thirdly, learn to pray. Learn to pray and ask God for guidance in that aspect of your life, because he's sitting there, she's sitting there waiting for you to ask for help. All you have to do is ask. And when you do ask, you'll find that you'll get answers. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back next week with a brand new show.